Dark Souls. Since the 2011 release of this challenging FromSoft sword and sorcery game, there have been enough Souls-like wannabes to overflow the Lord Vessel many times over. Take a look on Steam. The Souls-like tag has hundreds of entries alone, and this arena is only getting more crowded. Out of all the games that try to rekindle that sacred flame, only a chosen few have ever come close. Today, we're here to talk about one promising contender, a title from a small Brazilian team that aims to carry this burning torch. Trial Forge Studio was kind enough to provide us with a pre-alpha key so that we can spend a couple hours marching through this strange world of cults, mystics, and flat-screen TVs. And as always, if you want to join us at the Heroes table, we'll tell you a few ways you can support the channel near the end of the video. Today, we'll be roaming war-torn streets in this sneak peek of Deathbound. My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Kunz, and together, we are the two-headed hero.
Now, a lot of hero heads might not know this, but I have a long-time love for all things FromSoft. All the way back to the PS1 era. After spending so much time in these barren, foreboding worlds to the complete detriment of my mental health and sleep habits, a pattern slowly starts to emerge. There's a few key elements that make the game Soulsy. Strategic punishing combat that relies on precise timing and stamina management, large interconnected levels that double back on themselves, slowly opening up like a puzzle box, storytelling that prefers to show rather than tell, but hides a mountain of lore below the surface, just waiting for the curious player to exhume it. Massive, terrifying multi-stage bosses. Many Hollow Pretenders have included all these building blocks, but most fail to capture the level of quality and refinement that FromSoft is known for. Deathbound is shaping up to be an exception. These well-worn foundations show their faces here once more, but the inclusion of some smart combat mechanics, a unique setting, and a big cast of playable characters morph the experience into a unique power fantasy. Firing up a new game launches into the moments before a battle begins. The game's high-helmeted poster child, Throne, leads a group of death-worshipping fanatics in an assault on fortress walls, breaking through barricades and slaughtering hundreds. The scene ends with an anime moment between Big Hat Boy and this spiky shoulder guy before unceremoniously dumping you into the boots of 3 other characters. Yes, I said 3. The central mechanics of Deathbound involve swapping between different characters on the fly, and this works particularly well with the Xbox-friendly controls. Characters are mapped to the directional pad and can be swapped to at any time, even in the middle of a dodge. When a fighter takes too much damage or runs low on stamina, you can also use the Y button to panic morph to the healthiest one you have left in your lineup. But if any of your warriors falls, they all go down, and you'll end up respawning at the last visited bonfire. Well, the last one of these weird glowy obelisks, dropping all your coveted experience points in the process. Soulsy. So how good does Deathbound feel to play? Well, you lock onto the nearest victim, you start circling, and before you know it, you're doing the Dark Souls dance. Oh, you can dodge. Crazy. Oh, you can dodge that one. The input timings feel pretty good, and as expected, attacks all have a bit of a wind-up common to the Souls-like genre. A big hammer smashing down on a group of unsuspecting cultists feels quite satisfying and heavy, as are the reactions when foes are frozen or backstabbed. It's clear that the dev team spent a lot of time in the trenches of the original Dark Souls, and Deathbound does a pretty good job of emulating the weighty, intentional feel of that classic game. Movement is likewise comfortable, with a short teleport move being favored over the commonly seen dodge roll. Small amounts of slow motion are incorporated when pulling off a perfect dodge or a parry, which not only charges the sync meter, but gives you a window to consider your next input a little more carefully. Although I loathe the fact that there's no jump button, the movement in combat feels pretty impressive overall. For a pre-alpha, this is surprisingly polished. The central morph mechanics are also much more deep than they appear. The blowy glue sync meter at the bottom— blowy glue, what the hell? Blowy glue? The glowy blue sync meter at the bottom will slowly build up with each successful strike, and when one segment is full, you can tap a D-pad button during a combo to perform a powerful morph attack, or just hit Y to hot swap to the character with the most stamina. When all the sync bars at the bottom are full, the meter bursts into flame, allowing the player to unleash a single devastating morph strike that uses up the whole bar, but it looks freaking awesome. This focus on mid-combo character swapping gives Deathbound a bit of a tag team fighting game feel, even if it's not as bombastic or flashy as something like Marvel vs. Capcom 2. After looking around for a bit, it's easy to see that the city's been under siege for quite a while, and this is officially some time later. This becomes the most apparent the moment you set eyes on the cold, dead corpse of humongous headgear lad himself. I guess his anime moment didn't go down so well. Upon touching the moldering body, the player is launched into Theron's memory. It's a desolate landscape filled with ghosts of the past that tells us a little more about his actions and motivations as a nobleman in the service of the Death Church before he met his own eventual demise. You know, real wholesome stuff like burning his dad alive.
Do you accept death?
Son. My son, please. Please. Ah!
After this sequence, Big Hat McMaskeyface becomes another playable character to add to the loadout, and it's increasingly clear that you're playing as a bunch of undead spirits inhabiting one unhappy body. Deathbound throws the concept of a gear system out pretty much completely. Instead, characters represent a specific archetype which can be combined together in a loadout. All of these fighters handle pretty differently, down to their dodge distance, attack speed, and special abilities. Start out with a classic trio: the tough hammer-wielding behemoth, the crossbow rogue that can backstab, and a badass angry grandma that can throw magic around. Cool. She can do a Kamehameha. Pretty cool shit.
Nice.
If you cast too many spells in a row, Grandma overheats and explodes into a fireball that damages nearby enemies. 2 more characters can be found lying dead in the streets of this grand city, bringing the grand total to 5 that appear to be playable in the pre-alpha. Judging by the clues in the UI, the full game appears to have a final count of 8. Just including 8 playable archetypes might be enough to carry this entire concept by itself, but it also seems to tie into the story. Each avatar can have similar goals or diametrically opposed viewpoints to the others. At certain points, characters even freely express their distaste for each other using voice dialogue lines which pervade the shared body, kind of like an intrusive thought.
Stench of burning flesh.
These are my comrades you're talking about.
It's only a jest, my dear.
Do not call me dear. Better yet, don't refer to me at all.
These clashing spirits also serve a mechanical purpose. Check out the binding screen. Depending on whether your spooky ghost pals are sitting by their favorite friends or their worst enemies, your shared body will perform differently in the field, opening up some interesting build potential. This character-based approach carries over further into the skill tree, which has nodes corresponding to each character that are unlocked by spending an ever-increasing amount of XP. Doing this increases your performance across the board, but it also provides some individual benefits. Going deep into the wizard section of the tree lets you speed up your cast time and cause more damage, for example, while dropping more points on MC Hammer over here allows for sturdier defenses and more staggering attacks.
Can't touch this.
Discovering additional memories rewards memory points for a specific spirit, which in turn can further improve a single character with unique passive abilities. And on top of that, the various trinkets and relics you find scattered through the apartments and corridors of the city provide substantial bonuses that can also be upgraded to your tastes by locating special crafting materials. All of these different points, systems, and subsystems can feel a bit overwhelming at first, and I'm not completely sure if this is a lateral move or a step down from a more traditional stat point and gear grade RPG progression system, but at least it's something interesting, and I really enjoy that most of the leveling and gear bonuses are nice, big, even numbers, resulting in bonuses powerful enough to require some major forethought. Because I like big numbers. Big numbers that go up. A big part of the overall game feel in any Souls-like boils down to the quality of its animations. Does an enemy stagger beneath a sword strike? How about the player? How good are the hitboxes? Deathbox definitely does deliver on the animation side for the most part. I didn't really notice any glaring issues during my hours with the pre-alpha, and even though the game's cutscenes and memory sections were decidedly lo-fi compared to the rest of the game's dressing, they were effective enough in building up this strange world. And a strange world it is. The city you find yourself in is littered with the remnants of a once great society, mixed with some mysticism. It's complete with flat-screen TVs, retro-futuristic techno-elevators, massive trees, and glowy walls everywhere. Tons of barrels and crates just lie around, waiting for you to break them in a traditional Soulsy style, and that's pretty satisfying as well. A few vantage points show off the upper city in the background, and these scenic views definitely kindled the desire to go out and see what's up there. However, without any sort of map, the player is forced to rely on memory and landmarks, and a decent amount of the maze-like pathways through the lower city apartments were similar enough to get lost in. There were also a few interior sections that seemed just a little narrow for the camera to quite understand what it was supposed to do, which, if anything, felt a little too close to the first Dark Souls game's camera shortcomings for comfort. The character models are all highly stylized and detailed without too much complexity, giving the denizens of Deathbound somewhat of a mannequin-like 7th gen appearance. While it's a bit dark to see the finer details on a lot of the death cultists and zombie mobs that'll be blocking your path, there's a few real standout enemy designs. Like, check out this crazy 4-armed Dalsim looking thing crashing its way through the streets. Trialforge proudly notes that they were granted an epic grant to complete Deathbound. Naturally, this means it's a game based on the Unreal Engine, and some of those Unreal Engine tells poke their heads out here and there. The occasional Play-Doh hair or doll-eyed stare is not really enough to put me off of the visuals here, although I will say that the design of the first boss didn't really grab me. It seemed to lack the level of polish that some of the other enemies enjoyed. As for the music and sound, well, there's not a lot of music other than the gloomy, violin-heavy main theme, which is a cool song to be sure. I mean, you've been hearing it this entire time. What do you think? The sound effects are clear and pretty beefy, and they do a fine job of broadcasting info to the player even if nothing stands out as particularly unique. Voice acting is a pretty consistent B quality.
These are my men, Throne. I am the Lord.
Our goddess Death is the true lady above all lords, sire. It is the duty of all believers
I gave you no leave to speak.
However, once again, the area boss let me down here. Whatever it was saying during the cutscene was completely inaudible. So here's the boss. I gotta say, I was a little underwhelmed by the boss design. It's not bad. It's okay.
I'm waiting. Is it a door? Oh, okay.
Door boss would be pretty funny.
I don't know, it's kind of cool.
It's, yeah, it's alright. Story presentation also seems a bit less on the polished side. It's clear that this wasn't the focus of the game's budget in the few parts that contained any story elements at all. Still, I feel like Deathbound definitely nods to Dark Souls here by using a lot of subtle, small touches. There's occasional reactive voice lines from some of the playable characters and environmental reveals that help fill in the canvas of Deathbound's world. The game makes a smart choice to show rather than tell. I still wanted to know more, even if the premise of pitting the literal forces of life and death against each other might seem a bit on the nose. I will say that this pre-alpha felt surprisingly polished, but there's a couple things that stuck out from time to time. For one, this might just be a me thing, but I could not get Theron's parry ability to work with any level of consistency. Not sure if it was just the fact that the parry window seemed small, or maybe I'm just terrible at it, but it feels like it needs some tuning. I also sorely felt the lack of a jump button. This seems like it could really work into the urban level designs, and jump attacks would add a whole new dimension to the combat. Maybe even making it more satisfying than it already is to play. Interacting with objects on the ground can also get kinda fiddly, making it necessary to dance around a bit to get that use prompt to show up. I also noticed the occasional AI issue. Sometimes enemies would get stuck in place or hug the walls, not quite knowing what to do, or simply stand there while I crossbowed them in the face. The boss also suffered from this on occasion, but this was the exception rather than the rule. During my 3 playthroughs of this pre-alpha, generally I found the enemies were smart enough to hunt you down with brutal efficiency, making it tough to run away, and it's even possible to trick some of the enemies into infighting. Minor complaints aside, Deathbound is shaping up to be a really interesting entry into the crowded Souls-like arena, and it has enough differences in its recipe to really set itself apart. The pre-alpha is about 2 hours long, but even replaying it multiple times, I still don't think I found every nook and cranny hidden within it. Discovering uncovering the secrets and interactions between the unlockable phantasms is a pretty compelling hook, and I've got to hand it to a team that dares to try climbing up that bleak mountain upon which Dark Souls rests. No other indie Souls-like that I've played so far has captured that mysterious feeling of tension that the Souls games provide, even if all we got was a small 2-hour taste. If Deathbound seems like your thing, you can check out the brand new demo by jumping to the link in the description. And if you want to support us directly, links to our Patreon or Ko-Fi tip are still available in the description. A hearty thank you goes out from us to these fine heroes that dare sit at our table. If your fortune escapes you at the moment, well, a like, subscribe, and a couple words of encouragement go a long way, as well as sharing the video link on your favorite subreddit or social media page. And as always, thanks so much for spending your time with us. We'll see you on the next Two-Headed Hero.